Welcome to another episode of One of Us Knows What They're Talking About, and the other one is you. I'm Lori Burch, your host. Join us as we discuss and unpack wills, trusts, estate planning, and probate law in a way that's actually informative, interesting, and, well, hopefully entertaining. Because if you don't have a will, the state of Texas has one for you. Let's dive in. So let's get to it, shall we?
Yeah. We shall.
Shall we? Okay. This is a good topic today, as they all are every day. But let me tell you how this started. And I feel like we've added on to it, but basically we're going to talk about the 5 rules that I've created for staff, people, life. And what I was thinking we would do before we talk about these is to just name the 5. And if you're listening to this, you need to understand these are tongue-in-cheek, okay? Then what we'll do is break down why I'm saying this about each one of these rules. But there's the 5 rules for life, or maybe at least relationships. How's that? Relationships, because I could come up with some other rules there. So important to remember that these are tongue-in-cheek. So don't write any hate mail.
Ooh.
Sarah, did you get hate mail?
No.
Let's get our first piece.
No.
Listen, I'm shocked.
They wouldn't do that. I don't think people do that anymore. I think they just post about things or make videos about things. So anyway, it is tongue-in-cheek. Don't take this too seriously, but underlying each one of these rules that we're going to go through is some experience in real life experience and some thoughts for you to have. And they are mostly based on legal cases, but some of them are experiences that I've had, or I know that others have had, but a lot of them relate to what we experience here at Burch Law. And the impetus of really starting these rules is because somehow when I really started growing the practice, I started hiring or started having to apply, and those were the ones we chose, fairly young people. Early, mid-20s, or at least that's how they started out. And so, I had just a wee bit more life experience, relationship experience. So I started with these rules. So overview of the rules, tongue-in-cheek, we're going to go back and break them down because they are all based on some real actual examples. And I do expect class participation when we go back and talk about these. Okay. And then I believe Sam and Sarah have some other life rules or relationship rules that they have no business establishing or making, but they're going to. But I've been told none of them involve a dream of becoming a DJ.
Correct.
All right, the 5 rules.
Already
Number
Sarah's
1.
family.
Thanks for talking over me, Cynthia, with the most important part of this. All right, let's start again. All right, the 5 rules. Number 1, don't get married. Number 2, if you do get married, don't get divorced. Number 3, if you think you're going to get divorced, don't have kids. Number 4, in a blended family situation, and if you have stepchildren, just let them get your stuff. And number 5, don't change your name. Got it? Got it.
Got it.
So let's start with the first one. The first one was what?
Don't get married.
Don't get married.
Woo.
All right. Why do you think? Now you've heard all the reason why I wanted to go through all 5 rules, so you knew other things were coming and nobody was going to be like, oh my gosh, he's saying don't get married. What, based on your experience at Burch Law or personal experience, which I think there's very little there, do you think would be the justification for one of the rules of being, hey, just don't get married? Nothing.
Maybe
Dead air.
rushing into it. Maybe it's a mistake.
Sarah always looks like she's gonna say something,
Sarah
and then
like
she
leaned
doesn't.
forward
Always.
and opened her mouth, and I'm just like,
This happens every week.
You're just, you know what it is? You're a mouth breather. And so you're breathing, but it looks like you're about to say something.
you also
Yeah.
It's like this, like you take a breath.
To think, but you're doing it towards the mic, so it makes it look like you're about to
and it says
speak.
think you're about to share something, and I was like, this is going to get interesting. I don't wanna-
You're like the visual representation of Grant responding to something in ReCentral, where it's like typing, stop, typing, stop, typing, stop. And then there's never anything actually submitted except like 10 minutes later. And it's like 2 sentences. It's not even that, like, why did that take that long? And so that's what yours like. So we're all waiting for you. All right. Don't get married. So obviously, tongue in cheek, right? I've tried to establish that, but you've heard the other rules. So you know that there is some allowance for getting married. But interestingly enough, the other married person here is the one who got to the heart of this. And that is people rush in.
Yeah.
Wise men say only fools rush in. And that is true. And as our dear listeners, fans know, or should know if they're listeners and or fans or both, we deal a lot with the LGBTQ community. And this was something definitely when marriage equality passed. Hopefully we get to keep that, by the way. But when marriage equality passed, there was just a flood of, hey, should we get married now? And just because you can get married doesn't mean you should. And now that we're in an age where it could all go away, same questions are being asked to firms like ours that have special focus on said community, where should we get married before this or that? And you know what? I mean, rule number 1 is don't get married, right? So it is something that from a legal standpoint for sure, but really, I guess if we have to talk about emotions and feelings and other things, it's very hard to be untangled from.
Yes.
And so that's why reason number 2 is if you do get married, don't get divorced. But we'll get to that a little bit more when we flesh that out. But the idea is really to go into getting married very purposefully, very knowingly. And again, this is just input. You can take it or leave it. It's just, rules for life, for relationships that you can take or leave. But far too many, and I think that younger generations are actually being a little bit more discerning about this. It's not always going to work out like Cynthia and Luke, where they're, they have a shotgun wedding. No, I'm kidding.
Oh my gosh. Lori Louise.
That was only in my dream. Okay. That was
That
only
was
in my
only
dream.
in your dream.
But they did know each other since they were like embryos, essentially. But how long did you all know each other before you got married?
Before we got married, we were about, I'm gonna say 12 and 13, and we got married at 25 and 26.
When did you guys start dating?
Around 15. So like we knew each other and we were really good friends. And then we were like, yeah, sure. But then the thing is, we always had this thought of we need to be real with ourselves, and if we're gonna grow, if we're gonna like actually be happy. And so like we did a long distance thing. We hated it and like got married. Planned a wedding in 6 months. Don't recommend, but kind of do. Because then you just get it over with. But it is the most stressful thing ever to plan a whole ass wedding in 6 months. Just put it out there.
It's stressful to plan a wedding, period. And no matter how low key you think it's going to be, depending on how domineering your parents are, it never is, because it will never ever be about you. Yes, I know. It's your wedding, air quotes, but your wedding will never ever be about you. And actually, one of the reasons I say that is when I get to the next point of don't get divorced, and I'll speak a little bit as safely as I feel like I can. about being a child of divorce and why I feel strongly about what it's like to experience that. But yes, so the other thing that I have a couple things that I think you should do before you decide to get married. One, I think you should hear them eat a bowl of cereal.
Yeah.
And then when you listen to them eat a bowl of cereal, you need to tell yourself or ask yourself, ask yourself if that is something that once they're not as cute anymore, that you are good listening to that sound the rest of your life. It doesn't mean you have to like it.
No.
Right? I'm not saying that like, oh, I love the way they eat cereal or it doesn't bother me. It will bother you at some point. It will. You just have to decide, is that something that I can just deal with? Okay. The other thing is, I've had this theory, do any of you watch these dating shows, like especially the ones that end up in engagement, like The Bachelor, those, not a sponsor. You didn't watch those? So
Yeah.
that's fine. But, it's not like, what bothers me about it is I feel like anybody could fall in love if they're in like the most
Absolutely.
beautiful places on earth. They've got food and adventure and activity, all of that. Like, again, like who couldn't feel like this is my soulmate? I feel like they need to do a little bit of like a Bachelor and Survivor, or that show Weakest Link that they had, or well, not Weakest Link. What was the one where they would go? It'd be two people, and it could be friends or married couples or siblings, and they had to go on like excursions and do Amazing Race. Yes.
Okay.
So I think they should do like a Bachelor and Amazing Race before you get married. And like they need to go on a trip where one loses the luggage, or where a flight's delayed, or where
So Amazing Race.
Well, no, where you booked the wrong flight to where you have to get like on a bus to another town to get the airport there. Or how about you move together, move like a 3-bedroom apartment.
Oh, moving together. What are other good things that bring out the worst in people?
Doing the dishes, loading the dishwasher.
I feel
how
like
you load the
sleeping-
dishwasher.
I feel like
load it.
sleeping would
Yeah.
be a big one, right? Because you're going to be potentially sleeping next to this person for the rest of your life. So if you
Not
have-
necessarily.
that's why I say potentially. Like they could be kicking in their sleep, and like if you can't handle that for the next 40 years.
What if they have
like,
night terrors and scream?
Yeah, they see the demon in the corner of the room.
Yeah.
You never know. A show what I find interesting, going back to Bachelor, is that a lot of them will break up like a year later.
Yeah.
But Big Brother, that reality show, has the most like stable couples that are still together, because you're spending possibly 90 days in the house with somebody 24/7.
Yeah.
Not having a good time.
And here's what I want to say is the idea of them coming out of that and doing well with each other and getting along during the process is not the test. It's to see if you can still love and care about that person afterward. Because I'm going to tell you right now, I would venture to say that I think you all probably would agree that Kimberly and I are a very well matched couple.
Yeah.
A lot of stability there. I am telling you right now, if we went on Amazing Race together, we would kill each other.
You would quit within 5 minutes.
No, there would. Somebody would have to be restrained.
Yes, it would not be good.
And it would be Lori.
And the way that it would, of course it would be. And the way it would happen is the first couple episodes, if they edited it accurately, people would be like, wow, Lori's really rude to Kimberly and she's so sweet. And then there's going to be this tipping point where they're like, oh my God, we completely understand why Lori reacts this way and why she can't handle it. And I did a lot of Team Lori. They'd still be like, but Kimberly's so sweet. Like it would still, I still would lose in public opinion, I think.
Yeah,
but I'd get a few more people on my side.
Whenever I first started working in this suite, that was a big thing for me. I'm like, wow, Lori is so mean to Kimberly. And Kimberly's just giving all these really helpful suggestions. She's always just like the nicest, wanting to be helpful. And then I was like, wait, that was not the best time for that to be brought up. Wait, isn't
That's
Laura
what it
doing
always
a
is.
webinar? Why did she wheel the baby in behind her?
Yeah.
Wait, did
Her,
she just, like, bang on the
she has no
Yeah.
concept of timing. And she always has like the best ideas and brings them up at the
You're
worst and
great.
most inconvenient times. But
Yeah.
if you want anything done, like any project done, just give it to her and it's going to be done in like that. Like, it's not even humanly possible, I think, the way that she gets things done. But
Yeah.
anyway, so my point is I think this would be a fun show. So I don't know why nobody's created this. But what I'm telling you, as far as the advice of don't get married, I don't want to say just because you don't get along in those situations, it doesn't mean that you should not get married. It just means, what did you do with that information? How did you handle that? How do you feel about that person now, knowing that you've seen them at their worst? And can you deal with that the rest of your life? That's my thoughts. So let's then do an easy segue because it's somewhat related. Is rule number 2: if you do get married, don't get divorced. And the reason why, number 1, is about don't get married, haha, but being very purposeful and intentional about getting married and having realistic expectations, is because divorce is terrible.
It sucks.
We're in a community property state in Texas, and we have far too many people who come to us and they're not happy with their spouse, so they want to set up their documents, their wills, their trusts, powers of attorney and stuff without any knowledge of the spouse. And there's certain things you can do, but because it's a community property state, your assets are commingled. I mean, there's only so much that you can do and create, and wanting to hide things and this and that. I mean, the degree of clients that we have, and we don't do family law, meaning we don't do divorces and separation and child custody. We don't do that. So the extent of people that we have that want to keep things from their spouse, or they're thinking about divorce but haven't communicated that to them, it's really quite insane. And it's such a messy, emotional, expensive process to go through. And so if you've done your due diligence and really making sure that you feel confident about the person that you're getting married to, then before you're ready to call it quits, and hey, I've got a divorce under my belt. I've learned the hard way sometimes. And a lot of people have to have starter marriages. But before you call it quits, like really examine and give it your all. Like really make sure that this is the right decision. Counseling, talking through things, anything that you can do, because it really causes problems. And I guess if we were a family law firm, we'd be like, oh, but then get divorced, it's fine because there's a lot of money in it. But we don't do that. We're on the side of things where we either like happy couples or we like happily divorced people.
Yeah.
And when I was first doing this practice, I remember one of my early clients that was a married couple, and I was in my 20s, not married, no kids, nothing like that. So it was a new world to me. And my first client got divorced and sent me an email. So she said, hey, I'm getting divorced. I need to update my stuff. And so my immediate response was like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. And I hadn't even hit send on my email before I got a reply back. It's like, I'm not, it's the best thing ever. And I'm like, my bad. And so now, when I hear people who say we're getting divorced, is I'll say, congratulations. But I'll say, I know no matter how this how this may have needed to happen, that it's not an easy process to go through, and I wish you the best, because of all of that. But yes, do any of you want to offer input, thoughts, things that you've seen from knowing that, number 2, we'll get to kids of divorce, but knowing just the idea of a relationship or marriage dissolving, whether it's with the practice or your own limited experience? That's really for Sam and Sarah, because
Yeah.
Cynthia's lived 100 lifetimes.
Well, and also I worked in a family law firm. Anyway, but back to with one of the things that you said about counseling and about trying to see if you can work things out. I feel that a lot of people get into a marriage thinking every day is going to be super, super easy, super fun, this, that. It's like, no, it's great, but you also do have to keep working at it every day. Like, you have to choose to be there. You have to choose to, like, do the things to help both of you. And I think that's one piece that a lot of people gloss over. And so it's really think about it before you get married, but also when if you're going to get divorced, just don't be a butt. Like, don't be mean. Like, notice or realize,
Yeah.
accept that you made a mistake. You both did. There's no finger pointing. You both got into this whenever you probably weren't ready, probably shouldn't have. And here we are. You have
Indeed.
to own your own stuff.
Own your own stuff. Self-awareness, emotional intelligence. Make it happen. Sam, Sarah, anything? You don't have to. Now Sarah's going to do the whole thing where it looks like, sounds
Yeah,
like.
you did like lean in.
You
Like,
did. You
I know of divorced people, but that's all I have.
okay.
Yeah, same. I'm not a child
Okay,
of
very
divorce.
good.
I don't have any.
All right.
Well, I was gonna save that till
Well,
whoa.
Good segue.
okay, yeah, segue. So rule number 3. If you think you might get divorced, so you're ignoring the first 2 rules, and that is don't get married. Number 2, if you do get married, don't get divorced. But yet you have found yourself getting married, but you think you might get divorced. Please, please don't have children. For a lot of the aforementioned reasons, it and I'm not going to use too much of my personal experience since both of my parents are still alive. So catch up. We'll revisit this another time because they're avid listeners of the pod. I don't even think either of them know we had a podcast. We have a podcast.
Nice.
And I'm not going to fault either of them. Divorce is not when you're at your best, and so then when kids are involved, and I wasn't in one of those situations where I would say I've really felt like I was used as a pawn in the divorce. It's really more the difficulties I've experienced since then and growing up and divided loyalties and the visitations and the this and the that. And um, of course, good things have happened. I've never have had most incredible stepdad who passed, and then of course now because he passed, another incredible stepdad. Um, not saying the other way though. And then my dad's married some nice ladies, and some not so nice ladies. He's got a few
We
under
weren't
his
sure if
belt.
there were all ladies. Let's just
Well, some that can mean a lot of things, Cynthia. They're all women. Okay.
Sarah
Some
out.
better than not. And but yeah, it's when we were talking about marriages earlier, or not really marriages, but weddings. That's really one of the areas where I was like, man, it's just balancing, 2 people, and it even happened when my graduations, and like I had 3 graduations and they were all 3 different versions of hell. There was my high school, my college, and my law school graduation, which I wasn't even originally going to have my law school go to my law school graduation because of this very instance. But I was seeing a therapist at the time, as I have many times throughout my life, which is why I believe very strongly in therapy. And she convinced me that it was an important thing to acknowledge as an accomplishment, and so I made it happen. And I, the high school graduation was a disaster. The college graduation, I learned from it, so I kept things very separate. And then my law school graduation, I was a lot more intentional, where I gave them both their own time. And then by the time I got married, I was just like, you know what? You all just sort this out. Like you're going to be in the same room. And now that we've had, kids and we've had birthday parties here at our house, and if if my dad's in town and my mom comes over, like I can't anymore. I've got my own kids. I just can't with you. Just deal with it. And they actually do very well
Yeah,
together
they're
now.
great.
Yeah. So it's fine, but it really does take a toll on children. And so again, these are tongue in cheek, and I know that it can strike a nerve with a lot of people. And just so you know, it comes from, personal experience, a lot of this. But certainly when it comes to when we're trying to help do the legal planning for people, it's a real struggle because, if you've had children and you don't think that your ex-spouse is the best person to raise them, there's very, very limited circumstances where you can exclude their other parent from being the one who would raise them, no matter what he's married to, but preventing them from raising them. Now you can, though, and this is important, you can prevent your ex-spouse, your children's other parent, from controlling any of your money and assets. And that's something that we always try to tell our divorced clients that they can do. But yeah, if you can have the foresight, you are not going to listen to don't get married without putting some intention and planning and thought behind it. And if you do get married, but you feel pretty strongly that you're not ever going to get divorced, you're in it to win it, War of the Roses style even, then if you're in the third camp, you've ignored the first two rules, then try not to have children. Just try not to procreate. It's very hard on them. Anybody else want to contribute?
Yeah. One of the biggest things that I feel like, okay, my parents will never listen to this podcast. They don't know I'm on it. So I don't care. They should never have gotten married, period. That's just full stop. However, one thing that they did that was good for me and my brother is my brother and I are 10 years apart. They waited until I was legally an adult to actually go through the divorce process. To where for them, the community property stuff was one thing, but at least we didn't get put in the middle of it. Like custody, going back and forth, hearing like a lot of like the horror stories I heard from like friends growing up or people that I know, like they would hear their parents fight about what was going on, like in their court matter. And it's like, I appreciate that that didn't happen. Like,
Yeah,
like
and
let the kids know.
I'll share this at a risk that it'll come back to haunt me. But I mean, I was 7, 8 years old, and I remember whenever I would go visit one, I'm not going to say which parents, so we'll do that. I do know when I was going to go visit one parent, I was told all the things I could and couldn't say. And then when I would visit the other parent, I'd be pumped for information because they had a very contentious divorce. And so that was pretty difficult. I was 8 years old, and it messed with me a little bit, having to do that. I also, being that age, I remember vividly fights. I can see them. I can see where I am in the house. I can hear my mother's voice. I saw these fights play out. So to this day, 40 years later, I can still recall words and feelings and scenes of what played out. And I don't think any of us want that for our kids if we can avoid it. Whether it's avoiding getting divorced or avoiding having kids if you don't feel like you're in a good relationship. All right, let's move on to the next one because this is a real downer for me personally. I should have thought about that before we ventured into this, but it's okay. I mean, we can be somewhat serious sometimes, right? But it is the ultimate. One of us knows what they're talking about, and the other one is you. Like, here I am speaking to this from personal experience. All right, so number 4, this has come more from strictly the estate planning piece. Although because I've dealt with blended families and personally, it's come up. But the thing is, my family has never been it's just have it. Like, no, we're all good. All the stepkids, all the step siblings, like everybody really, really gets along. So I can't draw from some of the experiences that we've seen. But the rule number 4 is if you have stepkids, just accept the fact that they can inherit your stuff. Now, again, caveat, tongue in cheek, we do know that there are, reasons that you want to make sure that you preserve wealth or you have a financial obligation to your own children versus the children of who you're getting married to. Like, we get all of that. But what some people quite often, they don't want to do the intricate legal work that it takes to make sure that you can enforce that. And because we're in a community property state, it really, to keep assets separate, previous, but certainly once you're married, the best way to do that is with a premarital agreement, or if you're already married, a postmarital agreement, because it makes it very hard to say, well, I want this to go to my spouse, but I don't want it to go to his kids, or something like that. A scenario like that, that's very cumbersome and very restrictive. So how do you do that? Well, he can have it, but it can be in a trust for him, and then when he passes away, the trust is going to go back to my kids. Okay, so who's the trustee of that trust? Is he the trustee of that trust? Well, sure. Okay, so you trust him to make, not to use up all your money, so there's something left for your kids. Well, no. I'd rather have a different trustee. Okay, so you want your husband to have to be able to pay bills and pay the mortgage by going to someone else for having access to money. It's just, on and on and on, these kind of scenarios. They don't make it easy. It makes it very difficult when you're trying to slice and dice who gets what. And once you're gone, who gets what, with 100 different scenarios that can play out if you're the first to die. And so, again, another kind of one where it's like, if you want things to be as simple and as straightforward, which is actually the number one thing we hear from 99% of the people who want to get their will or trust done, wanting to make all these caveats of who gets what and when, it makes it very difficult. And for those who are just like, you know what, it's fine. We're not going to do the pre or post marital agreement, because that may feel like a complicated estate matter to do, but it actually makes your assets very simple when it comes to division. So if you're not going to do something like that, it really is just going to be much simpler and easier to just say, you know what, I'm gone. Let's divide it up. Let's divide it up this way. And not try to overdo it and overplan. Or, there's other strategies where if you've got a life insurance policy that you can just designate a beneficiary on, if the kids are adults, maybe you can do it that way. But again, if you're in a situation where the money that you have, you would want your surviving spouse to be able to use it, that's where it starts to get really sticky. Where we don't see this as much of an issue is when people get remarried later in life and they have adult children. If we use the premarital agreement especially, that's a little bit easier. But when they have like a his, hers, and ours scenario, that can get a little tricky. And I think it's good for couples to have that talk with each other before they meet with an estate planning attorney. Because
Why
when
not
you
during?
decide, because it helps if you've gone through some sort of discussion and are on the same page with each other, because there's been far too many meetings that I've had and other attorneys at our firm and other people at our firm, frankly, have had, where we know this is the first time they're having this conversation and they're not being completely forthcoming with one another. So when they walk out of the office, I mean, we're in business to make money. We do it by helping people with very important things, but we are a for-profit business. So for you to meet with us and then to walk out our door and know that, well, that grenade just went off and the two of you are going to be going back and forth on stuff for quite some time. Who knows if you'll ever hire us? It's not beneficial. It's not beneficial to us from a selfish standpoint, but it's certainly not beneficial if you want to get anywhere and actually get something done. Try to start having those conversations about how you would imagine things to be divided up. Even if you don't have kids and even if you don't have a blended family, still a good idea to talk about it before rather than during your meeting with somebody.
So wait, are you
Thoughts?
saying that counselor at law doesn't mean that you can counsel them on these things?
I would rather not. No, there is no actual training that attorneys have when it comes to therapy or emotional distress.
They just have
Please work it
emotional
out.
distress.
Just work it out. Just work it out. Okay. So the final rule for relationships from Lori L. Burch Esquire is don't change your name. Now, of course, if you want to change your name, right? I just put this here because changing your name, the legal mechanics of changing your name. So if you want to go through a legal name change, that's really easy. You go to the court. It's one of the few things that are pretty spelled out without even needing an attorney. Or if you're doing this because you got married, just take your marriage license and social security driver's license that, you get that changed. It's all the other stuff. It's, oh, we have our trip booked to Hawaii and my ticket's in this name and now I have this name. Or it's passports, or it's how your name is listed on bank accounts, or how your home is titled, or how your beneficiaries are set up, or at the HR department at work. I mean, it's just, if you change your name, be committed to that name. So for people who change their name through marriage, understand that if you do get divorced, is that a name you want to keep with? If you have kids and they have the surname of the person that you married, do you want to keep that surname at least while they're in their growing years so that you have the same name as your kids? Like, how do you feel about all of that? Something that I've seen more recently is couples who will agree upon a completely third name, and that's going to be their family name. I mean,
Right.
maybe that's the way to go, or hyphenated names or what have you. We talked about this when Jamie Dugan was on last time, is just how people don't actually know what their legal names are, which is just really quite shocking. But changing your name is really a big legal and social undertaking. And by social, I mean all the other things that you would have to do in society to make that name change. And then if you want to change it back because you got divorced, it's just wash, rinse, repeat. It's messy and difficult. If you just don't change your name, you don't have to do any of that. I did see something, and this is completely not researched, by the way. It was just one of those things because everybody's in a mad panic about something going on during current political times where something about preventing women from being able to change their names if they get married to their husband's names. Oh, no, it's not that. It's about voting. It's about you can only vote with your given name at birth. So, because customarily women usually are the ones who change their name to their husband's name, they would, unless they go and change their birth certificate, they wouldn't be able to vote. I don't even want to take the time to like break this down
All
because I
right.
don't know it's even slightly legit or not, but I did see something about it. And since we're talking about name changes, I just had to bring it up. Sarah.
Fingers crossed, I guess. That's all I'm thinking. I don't know.
Yeah. It's a
Are
little
you
out
planning on
there.
changing your name anytime soon?
Well, I guess.
It's
Oh,
not.
I guess it is the same as birth. Yeah.
Yes, Sarah.
Sam's isn't the same though, right?
Oh.
Well, she's
Or is it legally
also
changed?
It should be legally changed. I would hope so.
But what's on
your
your birth
parents just
certificate?
decided to just
The
say
fact
it
that
was
you're not
different.
sure, it just proves the point of what we do with
I
constantly.
like if you ask me where my birth
Man.
certificate is, I genuinely don't know.
Well, your
I think
birth
I'm
certificate's
guessing
gonna
it's at my
say
parents.
Walsh.
Yeah, but I don't know if they like
Oh.
officially changed it
Yeah.
when they got married.
Also, another thing, people don't realize all the stuff you have to do to update your social security card, update your driver's license, and like do all the little things, even with the marriage license and everything. If you're going to undo it, it is a pain.
Yeah.
Having talked people through the process several times. Good luck.
What if you just what if you just keep your previous driver's license and social security card when you change it back and you just throw away the new ones, but
Hey
you use the
Sarah,
old
have
ones?
you gotten a new driver license recently?
Say it wasn't expired.
You
Yes,
know,
I
when
have, to answer your
you
question.
go and hold on. I guess you can renew yours online.
Must be nice.
Yeah, must be nice. But whenever you go in person, they take your old one and they cut the top.
Yeah, they do like a little corner cut.
Do they really?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
when you go in
Because
person.
you can only renew, unless they've changed it, you can only renew online so many times until you do have to go back
have to go in
in.
person. Mm-hmm.
You probably haven't lived long enough to know that.
Nope.
Yeah.
But I always do. I always want to keep it because, you know, a little well-known fact about me is I'm photogenic. And so all my
Oh,
driver's
same.
license pictures are really good. So I want to keep them. I lived out in DC when I went to law school, and I didn't know whether I was going to stay out there. So I kept my Texas driver's license. And then I finally decided, well, it seems like I'm going to stay here. And so I had just gotten my Virginia driver's license. Great picture, by the way. And it was just a couple months later. It was just a couple months later when my stepdad had passed, and I decided I'm going to move back to Texas. So
Wow.
I didn't get to have that one too long. But anyway, yes, it's a big pain to change your name. So those are the 5 rules for relationships. Take it or leave it. But I think while the main headline of each rule may seem a little drastic, hopefully our discussion of it will give people some more thought as to how they decide to navigate life, and certainly how they decide to navigate relationships when it comes to their estate planning. With that, I believe that Sam and Sarah have their own rules for something.
Or
Yes.
some.
Yes.
5 rules for new couples.
So you also have, for new couples.
Right.
New couples.
For new couples. Okay.
Yes. Okay. The first one is tell them you're afraid of commitment. Play hard to get.
Excellent plan.
Yes. And then number 2, what you want to do is you want to show up at their residence at 3 a.m. every 3.5 nights so they know who's in charge.
How do you do that every 3.5 nights?
That's up to you.
Like you do 3 and then 1.
Sure. There was no rhyme and reason to the hop.
I'm going to venture to say that these were not very well thought out.
I mean, some of it's just up to your interpretation. What do you think is 3.5
Also,
nights?
I hope neither of you have done these things.
No.
You think that saying 3.5 days is subject to interpretation.
Yeah.
That is the exact problem of where we are in this world right now.
Every 3.5 nights, not days.
Yeah, sorry.
It says nights.
Does say nights.
I still feel like that's not subject to interpretation.
We'll just say 3 nights just to make it easier. We'll take
there you go.
3 or so nights. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll even
The
give you
next
3
one,
or so.
the next rule for new couples: slowly steal one of their socks every few weeks, and then find it a month later, so they associate you with with happy times, which is having their full socks back.
Isn't that kind of like gaslighting?
More like conditioning.
Okay. Okay.
So next,
Hey
you want to propose.
Hey guys, hold on. I need to add something. My vacuum robot accidentally does this to us quite frequently.
And you've kept as a one, so
yeah, but it does frustrate me more than it makes me happy to find the dirty sock.
Fair.
That's fair.
Why are socks on your floor? That's something that I
Because my
ask
husband,
all the time at my home.
Not me. It's my husband. I will throw him under the bus. They're his socks.
Rip. Okay, next, you want to propose on the second date to show them that you are committed after saying you're not. Do a full 180.
Okay.
And then the last rule for new couples is to make them sign a blood contract.
What exactly is a blood contract?
You make them sign it with their blood.
But
And what does
is
the
it
contract
just,
say?
That's up to you.
but is it
Rats.
written in blood and they sign it in blood? Can we use just ink that looks like
No, it's
blood?
got to be blood. It's not a blood contract if it's not blood. I think it
If
just
it's
has
written
to
in your
at least
blood, could
be
that be a
signature.
holographic will?
Well, if you
Ooh.
write it, it has to be in your own hand, but if it's in your blood in somebody else's hand, I think that takes away from the holographic
What if
nature.
somebody cuts off your hand and then writes a will with the hand, with the blood from your hand?
You tell me, counselor.
I think we'd have to litigate it.
We don't do that, we'd refer it out.
Oh, we certainly would. We would look through our little Rolodex, which is an old-timey expression. We don't actually have
We
one.
need
But we
one.
look through our little Rolodex and find an estate planning and probate firm that we like the least.
Yeah.
I would just like to say that my 5 rules were all fact-based on actual life events or experiences. And your 5 rules are complete nonsense based on nothing.
Yes,
I
these have
mean,
not been
isn't that
proven.
yeah? Isn't that usually how our segment goes?
Both of you
Suppose
don't
that's
like the
true.
sight of blood.
I don't mind blood.
I don't mind blood.
Wait, whose blood is it?
Body? Like I'm not gonna faint at blood.
I watched the needle go in. It's fine.
Your own
Oh,
arm?
okay.
Like
We
on your
are
own arm, though?
now,
Yeah.
no, we have now reached a
Well,
point where
Sam,
I
not
can't
you. I
take
had
it
broken
anymore.
with it.
Okay. So to sum up, there are lots of different rules for new relationships, marriage, what have you. You decide which ones you want to take or ignore. But I will say, with my 5, if you ignore any of them, don't say I didn't tell you. Thanks for listening. And just to cover all our bases about what you just heard, I'm sorry and you're welcome. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. And tell your friends about us. We do webinars and live events. The best way to stay up to date is to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. Links are in the show notes. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover, maybe you have a question you'd like us to answer, or maybe you just want to say hi, hit the link in the show notes or go to burch-law.com/podcast and fill out the contact form.
Much better.
Yeah, I thought that had a lot of energy.